With all the digital marketing, the online agencies, and people working from home nowadays, there's a big risk that people are starting to talk about, and that's called cyber insurance. There's a big misconception that that's a coverage that a lot of people need when they're really talking about personal liability cyber insurance. So we're going to dive right into the differences between those and see which one is a fit, whether you even need it or not. So starting off with cyber insurance, it's pretty basic. That is more of a commercial piece. That's for somebody that owns a business. I was actually part of one of the fraud claims back in the past. If you guys may have known, back a few years ago, there was a company, Target, and they got hacked. All of the customers that shopped at their store within a certain time frame were notified that they have to get a new credit card. I didn't even know. It just happened, and all of a sudden I got a new card in the mail, and I was shocked. I was like, what the heck is going on? I got a free credit service that I can check my credit to monitor, and nothing became of it. I'm actually shocked I didn't get a letter in the mail from the scammers telling me, here's some extra money because we know you need it. But in all seriousness, Target was hit bad. And the biggest piece of that is whether they had cyber insurance or not. And that really protects you in those situations. So as a company, if you need to have that protection, it's not just getting the insurance to pay for a claim if somebody steals the data, but it's also to prevent it, because it really drags your name through the mud, and it's 7 to 10 years later and they're still talking about this attack. Well, they weren't the only ones that had this happen. There's multiple large companies that have had this happen in multiple incidences, and this was just hackers trying to get in and steal the data of customers, mainly their social security numbers, their addresses, so they can open up new credit cards, not so much stealing the cards that are on file. And that's not the only piece of it, because it could be that nowadays for a company, if you have an employee that goes and works from home, you're at a risk, because if that data leaks out of that personal profile, then you're going to have an attack that comes in through an employee. It's usually easier to shut down, but it's usually too late by the time you figure it out. Another piece that has happened to a few companies is when you're used to writing paychecks. So an employee will typically get a bill from a company, they'll write out a check and pay that company. Well, what happens is they get used to specific companies, and they may not realize that they no longer work with some of them, and these hackers realize that. So once they figure out that that company no longer is on the books, they'll make up an invoice in those names and get you to write checks to them. So if you're in a larger company, you may be writing $100,000 to $200,000 checks. Now, I've actually worked with some coworkers that have had this happen, not them directly, but the banker that they work with had done that, and several $100,000 go out the door. And these are checks. Once that's cashed, there's no getting it back. There's no protection against that. And that's where some of this cyber insurance starts to come into play. It's not just that part of it. It's also the protection ahead of time. And what these companies do is they're really offering a service that's going to protect you and test your network, test your ability to withstand some of these cyber attacks that are happening. Now, I'm not going to dive too heavy into the commercial side of it, because this channel is mainly for personal use. We're going to go into that next. But I will tell you, for those that are owning a business and you're interested in that, the companies that you should be looking at are Nationwide, Liberty Mutual, Travelers, and AIG. Those were, in my research, those were some of the top companies that did the commercial version of cyber insurance. Now, the personal side is called liability cyber insurance, and that's where you're at home and you're protecting your personal data. Well, Mark, doesn't my policy normally just cover stuff like that? Well, no, because liability is covering an injury to somebody in your home insurance. So even if you have $1 million there, it's not going to cover a digital attack. What happens is people, once again, get into your network and they get into your data, especially if you have a home-based business. What they're doing is they're not only phishing your information, but anybody else's they can connect to. On top of it, sometimes they just want to do pranks and they want to bully people online, or they want to show you being the bad person, and so they'll take your data, make fake accounts, and you're going to be liable for that. Well, your liability insurance doesn't connect to those online pieces. Those are typically exclusions in most policies. Now, here's the really neat part, is a lot of these companies like Nationwide, what they're doing is when you purchase a cyber policy, they're going to give you data breach equipment, or they're going to give you some digital software that's going to help you protect those things. because it makes sense for them to not just protect you as far as covering that. And in most claims, you're usually going to be out about $4,000 on average. That's the most common attack that people get. Most of the time, it's like a ransomware where a company is going to hold your data or your personal photos or anything that you love dear on your computer. They're going to take over. They're going to download the data, delete it off your system, or lock it somehow so that you have to pay them money to get it back. I've actually got a little bit of personal experience in this situation. Our pastor actually had that happen to him where he had gone online and all of a sudden these pop-ups started showing up and it says, to unlock your computer, call this 800 number. He calls it and gave them his credit card. They said, we're going to unlock it. Well, naturally, he started, all of a sudden, his credit card started buying things online, and he didn't realize what had happened. Now, in his situation, I believe the credit card company actually helped him get this back, and I believe they refunded some of the fees. But with something like that, you better make sure that your cards that you're using or your banks that you're using have protection against that, because you may be the unlucky one that loses the average $4,000 per claim. The other claims that can happen can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially if it becomes cyberbullying and things happen that aren't supposed to and you're on the hook liability-wise. Well, you still have to have a legal right or a reason to protect your data, and if that's not, you could be a victim of this situation. The company I lead towards looking into research-wise was Nationwide. It's actually a company I've worked with before, and they've been really good. They actually offer what's called a phishing protection, a data encryption, and a few other services that'll encrypt or hide your data so that when you're sending emails or you're sending information back, it's going to block phishing emails where they call it phishing because they're trying to collect your data. It's something that's not very expensive, so if you're looking for more of a basic coverage, if you're going to do like the $10,000 to $25,000 coverage for something like that, you're probably going to pay about $25 to $50 a year to have that extra protection. Now, if you're going to go for the larger plans, I've seen some of the 100,000 plus plans where they have a lot more to lose in those situations. Those companies are going to charge upwards of $500 or $50 per month to have that additional benefit. The neat part is when you go with those plans, they typically have some sort of data storage so you can protect it with their own servers. And if that's the case, it might be better that you store your data somewhere in a cloud where it has that data protection. The most important piece that when you have a cyber attack is that you make sure that the person's gone. How do you know that your computer has been cleaned and there's not another little phishing device sitting there waiting for you to type in your password again? That's probably the most important piece of the cyber insurance, where they're going to protect it not only to the point where they're going to pay money to fix all of these issues, or at least get you connected with the right company that's going to help you fix those, but they're also going to make sure that that data is clean, that at the end of the day, with everything said and done, you're comfortable and confident that you can go right back to what you were doing and have everything back the way it was. So the next part is to find out what your guys' thoughts are. I'm curious if you think that cybersecurity is just another ploy for an insurance company to get some extra money in the door. Or do you really see a benefit to where our digital age, or the future of our digital age, needs more protection against things like that? As computers get smarter and learning systems start to realize that there's a lot of threats out there, as there's protection with Apple or Windows, do you think that cybersecurity is something that would be beneficial? Would you pay $25 to $100 a year for that protection? Let me know in the comments below. If you guys are interested in contributing to the channel, I've also have a link down there. It's called Buy Me a Cup of Coffee. For those of you that know me, I love my coffee and I appreciate anyone that does that. Otherwise, the subscribe button is below as well if you are interested in more data like this. And don't forget to smash that like button. I will see you guys in the next one.